She was sold at auction like property until a mysterious stranger said, "My son needs you." What happened next will break your heart.
Subscribe to Wild West Soul Stories. Hit the bell, like, comment, and share. Thanks for watching.
The summer of 1878 brought nothing but heartbreak to the small town of Copper Springs, Arizona Territory. The sun hung mercilessly in the sky, burning away the last traces of hope that clung to the desperate souls gathered in the town square. Emmeline Ward stood on the wooden platform, her hands clasped tightly in front of her faded blue dress. The fabric had once been beautiful, purchased by her father during better times when their small farm produced enough wheat to feed the entire county. Now the dress hung loose on her thin frame, a ghost of prosperity, long since vanished. She was 23 years old, and she had lost everything. First came the drought that killed the crops. Then came the fever that took her mother in the quiet hours of a November night. Her father followed 3 months later, his heart simply giving out from grief and exhaustion. The bank had wasted no time claiming the land, the house, and everything inside it. Emmeline had walked away with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small leather journal that contained her mother's handwritten recipes and pressed wildflowers. The auctioneer, a portly man named Henderson with a voice like gravel, scraping against tin, called out to the crowd. This was not the kind of auction where cattle and horses exchanged hands. This was a labor auction, where desperate women contracted themselves as domestic workers, cooks, and caretakers in exchange for room, board, and modest wages. It was legal, it was common, and it was humiliating beyond measure. Emmeline kept her eyes fixed on the distant mountains, those purple peaks that had once seemed so beautiful when she watched them from her bedroom window. Now they looked like prison walls, trapping her in this moment she would never escape. The crowd was sparse. A few ranchers looking for kitchen help, a widow who needed someone to care for her ailing husband, a stern-faced woman from the boarding house who examined each girl like livestock. Henderson began, his pitch, his words washing over Emmeline like dirty water. She heard fragments about her skills, her education, her good health. She felt the eyes of strangers measuring her worth in dollars and cents. The first bid came from the boarding house woman, $5 a month plus meals. A rancher countered, "But $6. Emmeline closed her eyes. She thought about running, about escaping into those mountains and disappearing forever. But where would she go? How would she survive? The world had become a cage with no doors. The bidding continued, climbing slowly. $8, $10. The boarding house woman dropped out with a dismissive wave of her hand. $12 from a man Emmeline recognized as the owner of the saloon. Her stomach turned. She knew what kind of work awaited girls who went to work in such establishments, even in the most innocent capacity. The whispers, the assumptions, the ruined reputation that would follow her forever. She opened her mouth to protest, but the words caught in her throat, and then everything stopped. A voice cut through the murmur of the crowd, like a knife through silk. It was deep and quiet, carrying an authority that commanded immediate attention. "My son needs you." Emmeline's eyes flew open. A man stood at the back of the crowd, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the afternoon sun. He wore a dusty brown coat and a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows across his face. As he stepped forward, the crowd parted before him like the Red Sea before Moses. He was tall, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of summer storms. His face bore the weathered lines of a man who had spent his life working under open skies, and there was something haunted in his expression, a sadness that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep within his soul. He repeated himself, his voice steady but soft. $20 a month. My son needs you." Henderson's eyebrows shot up toward his receding hairline. That was an extraordinary sum for domestic work, nearly double what any other bidder had offered in protest. But the saloon owner sputtered in protest, but the stranger simply turned his gaze toward him. Something in those gray eyes made the saloon owner fall silent and step back. Henderson looked between the two men, then shrugged his heavy shoulders. "Sold," he declared. "To Mr. Nathaniel Cross," the stranger said. "I have a ranch 12 miles north. The Circle C." Emmeline had heard of the Circle C. Everyone in Copper Springs had. It was the largest cattle operation in the territory, spanning thousands of acres of prime grazing land. Nathaniel Cross was wealthy beyond measure, yet he was also known as a recluse who rarely came to town, and he had a son who, according to the whispered gossip of town women, had not spoken a single word in over 2 years. Emmeline descended from the platform on trembling legs. Nathaniel Cross approached her, removing his hat to reveal the full measure of his face. He was handsome in a rugged way, but it was his eyes that captured her attention. They held a desperation that mirrored her own. "Miss Ward," he said, his voice rough around the edges, "I apologize for the manner of our meeting. What I said about my son needing you, I meant it." Emmeline found her voice, though it came out barely above a whisper. "I do not understand, Mr. Cross. You do not know me. How could you know what your son needs?" "Yester." Nathaniel was silent for a long moment. Then he reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a small worn book. It was a collection of poetry. Emmeline recognized it immediately, for she had carried an identical copy throughout her girlhood. "My son," he said slowly. "His name is Samuel. He is 8 years old. 2 years ago, his mother took ill and passed. Since that day, he has not spoken. Not to me, not to the doctors, not to anyone." His hands tightened around the book. "But he reads constantly, and he writes. He fills pages with words he will not say aloud. Last week, he wrote something that made me come to town today." Emmeline waited, her heart pounding against her ribs. Nathaniel opened the book and removed a folded piece of paper tucked between the pages. He handed it to her with hands that trembled slightly. She unfolded the paper and read the childish handwriting. "Papa," it said, "I dreamed about a lady with sunshine in her hair and sadness in her eyes. She was standing on a stage and everyone was looking at her like she was not a person. But she is a person. She is like me. She lost everything too. If you find her, please bring her home. Maybe she can teach me how to be brave enough to speak again." Emmeline's vision blurred with tears. She looked up at Nathaniel Cross, this powerful man reduced to searching crowds for a woman from his son's dreams. "He saw you," Nathaniel said quietly. "The moment you stepped onto that platform, I knew. The sunshine hair, the sadness. He saw you, Miss Ward, somehow, and I have learned not to question the things my son sees." Emmeline looked at the paper again, at the carefully formed letters written by a small hand, a child who had not spoken in 2 years. A child who carried the same weight of loss that pressed upon her own shoulders. "I am not special, Mr. Cross," she said. "I cannot heal your son. I am barely surviving myself." Nathaniel placed his hat back on his head and met her eyes. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps 2 broken people can help each other find the pieces they have lost. Either way, Miss Ward, I am offering you a home, a real home, not servitude. You will be Samuel's companion, his teacher if you are willing. You will eat at our table and be treated as family. And if the day comes when you wish to leave, I will provide you with enough money to start fresh wherever you choose." Emmeline stood in the dusty town square, the paper clutched in her hand, and made the decision that would change everything. She said yes. The journey to the Circle C took most of the afternoon. Nathaniel drove the wagon himself, and they traveled in comfortable silence through landscapes of breathtaking beauty. Rolling hills covered in golden grass gave way to groves of cottonwood trees, their leaves shimmering silver and green in the breeze. Nathaniel spoke only occasionally, pointing out landmarks or explaining the boundaries of his property. His voice was kind but guarded, like a man who had forgotten how to open himself to another person. Emmeline understood. She had built similar walls around her own heart. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the ranch house came into view. It was larger than Emmeline had expected, a two-story structure of whitewashed wood, with a wide porch that wrapped around three sides. Flower boxes hung beneath the windows, empty now but showing signs of recent care. "My wife planted those," Nathaniel said, following her gaze. "Samuel tends them. He grows wild flowers in the spring." The wagon rolled to a stop before the house, and Emmeline saw him. A small boy stood on the porch, his dark hair falling across his forehead, his gray eyes, so like his father's, watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He wore simple clothes and held a book pressed against his stalk alarmer. Wet Samuel did not wave. He did not smile, but as Emmeline stepped down from the wagon, she saw his lips move silently, forming a single word, "You." Nathaniel helped her with her small bag and led her toward the house. Samuel remained frozen on the porch, his eyes never leaving her face. "Samuel," Nathaniel said gently, "this is Miss Emmeline Ward. She's going to stay with us for a while." The boy said nothing, but he stepped forward and did something that made his father gasp audibly. He took Emmeline's hand. His small fingers wrapped around hers with surprising strength, and he tugged her toward the front door. Emmeline looked back at Nathaniel, whose eyes had filled with tears he was struggling to contain. "He has not reached for anyone," Nathaniel whispered. "Not since his mother." Samuel led Emmeline through the house, past comfortable furniture and family portraits, up a staircase, lined with photographs of cattle drives and mountain sunsets, and into a small bedroom at the end of the hall. The room was clearly prepared for her. Fresh linens covered the bed, and a vase of wildflowers sat on the windowsill. Samuel released her hand and pointed to the flowers, then to himself. "You grew these," Emmeline said softly. "For me. Iade." Samuel nodded. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew another piece of paper, already folded and ready. He pressed it into her palm and ran from the room before she could respond. Emmeline unfolded the paper with trembling hands. "I knew you would come," it read. "The dream showed me. You are going to help my papa learn to smile again, and maybe I will help you remember how to sing. My mama used to sing. I miss it. I miss words. They got stuck inside me when she went to heaven, but I think you can help me find them. Emmeline sat down on the edge of the bed and wept. The days that followed were quiet but transformative. Emmeline fell into a routine with Samuel, spending mornings teaching him from the school books Nathaniel had purchased in town, and afternoons exploring the vast property together. They communicated through written notes and gestures, developing a silent language that belonged only to them. Samuel showed her his favorite hiding spots: the old oak tree, where he read for hours, the creek where tadpoles gathered in spring, the hilltop where his mother was buried beneath a simple stone marker. They sat together at that grave one afternoon, the wind rustling through the grass, and Samuel wrote her a note. "She would have liked you." Emmeline wrote back, "Tell me about her." And Samuel did. Through pages and pages of cramped handwriting, he told her about his mother's laugh, her terrible cooking, her beautiful voice, the way she danced with his father in the kitchen when she thought no one was watching. She got sick fast, Samuel wrote. One day she was singing. The next day she could not get out of bed. Then she was gone, and all my words went with her. Emmeline held the boy close as he cried without sound, his small body shaking against hers. She understood his grief intimately. She carried the same weight, the same silence, the same desperate fear of loving anything again. Nathaniel watched these developments from a careful distance. He joined them for meals, his eyes softening as he observed his son's transformation. The boy who had retreated into himself was slowly emerging, reaching toward the light again. And Nathaniel found himself reaching toward Emmeline. It happened gradually, in small moments that accumulated like snowflakes, forming a drift. The brush of fingers when passing dishes at dinner, the shared laughter when Samuel convinced them both to wade into the cold creek on a hot afternoon. The quiet conversations on the porch after Samuel had gone to sleep. Nathaniel told her about his wife, about the consuming love they had shared, and the devastation of losing her. Emmeline told him about her parents, about the farm, about the dreams she had carried before the world crushed them under its weight. "You are remarkable," Nathaniel said, one evening. "As the stars emerged overhead, you have lost everything, yet you still find the strength to comfort my son." Emmeline shook her head. Samuel is comforting me," she replied. "I came here believing I had nothing left, but your son has shown me that capacity for love is the one thing that cannot be taken from us. It remains, even when everything else is gone." Nathaniel moved closer, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes, close enough to count the lines that grief had carved around his mouth. "Emmeline," he said, her name a prayer on his lips, "I brought you here for my son, but I find myself hoping you will stay for reasons that have nothing to do with Samuel." Her heart raced. She thought of all the reasons she should maintain distance, protect herself, guard the fragile reconstruction of her soul. But she also thought of this man who had seen her at her lowest moment and offered her dignity. This man who loved his son with a fierce tenderness that made her believe in the fundamental goodness of the world. "I am afraid," she whispered. "So am I," Nathaniel replied. "I have been afraid since the day I buried my wife. But Samuel's words keep echoing in my mind. He said, 'You would help me learn to smile again.' And you have, Emmeline. You have brought light back into this house." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. It was 3 months to the day since Emmeline had arrived at the Circle C, when Samuel Cross spoke his first word in over 2 years. They were sitting together at the breakfast table, morning sunlight streaming through the windows, when Samuel looked at Emmeline and opened his mouth. "Stay," he said. The word was rusty, cracked, barely audible, but it was there. A word, a spoken word. Nathaniel dropped his coffee cup, the ceramic shattering against the floor. Neither he nor Emmeline noticed. "Samuel," his father breathed. "Samuel, you spoke." The boy's eyes filled with tears, but he kept going, forcing the words out like water breaking through a dam. "For stay with us. Please. Be my family. I love you." Emmeline flew from her chair and gathered the boy into her arms, crying and laughing simultaneously. Nathaniel joined them, his strong arms encompassing them both, his tears falling freely into Emmeline's hair. They stayed like that for a long time, 3 broken people holding each other together. That evening, Nathaniel asked Emmeline to marry him. They stood on the hilltop overlooking the ranch, the sunset blazing across the sky, in colors so vivid they seemed impossible. Samuel stood between them, holding both their hands. "I know this is sudden," Nathaniel said, "and I know you came here under unusual circumstances. But I love you, Emmeline. I love the way you have healed my son. I love the way you have healed me. I love your strength and your gentleness, and the way you laugh when Samuel does something ridiculous. I want to spend the rest of my life making you happy, if you will let me." Emmeline looked at Samuel, who squeezed her hand and smiled, a real smile that reached his gray eyes. "Say yes," Samuel urged, his voice still rough but growing stronger. "Please say yes." Emmeline thought about the auction platform, about the humiliation and despair of that terrible day. She thought about the drought and the fever and the graves she had left behind. She thought about all the darkness that had threatened to swallow her whole, and then she thought about the light that had emerged from that darkness. A strain, boy's dream, a desperate father's hope. a love that had grown from the ashes of loss. "Yes," she said, "yes, I will marry you." Nathaniel kissed her then, gentle and sweet, while Samuel cheered beside them. The sun slipped below the horizon, and the first stars appeared overhead, and Emmeline Ward realized that she had found something she never expected to find again. She had found home. The wedding took place 1 month later, in the small white church in Copper Springs. The same town that had witnessed Emmeline's darkest moment now celebrated her greatest joy. Samuel served as ring-bearer, speaking clearly and confidently, his voice growing stronger with each passing day. As Emmeline walked down the aisle toward Nathaniel, she caught a glimpse of Henderson, the auctioneer, watching from a back pew. His expression was unreadable, but Emmeline felt no anger toward him. That platform had led her here, to this moment, to this man, to this child who had somehow seen her across the boundaries of dreams. She had lost everything once, her home, her parents, her hope. But she had been found by a love greater than her loss. And as she took Nathaniel's hand and spoke her vows before God and the gathered witnesses, Emmeline understood the truth that Samuel had known all along. Some souls are meant to find each other, through darkness and light, through grief and healing, through the mysterious workings of dreams and desperate prayers. They will always find their way home. To each other, the end